Welcome to Joy Connection, your journey to well-balanced living podcast series. Please welcome your host, Ralph Weaver.
Hi, I'm Ralph Weaver, and welcome to EWC Joy Connection, Journey to Well-Balanced Living. Today's episode is about wills and trusts. Why should one complete one? And where does one even begin? I'm sure those are questions that will be answered during this episode. The topic is of interest to me because of the loss of a dear friend and family members, and I saw firsthand how important it was that their wishes were carried out. Crystal Edwards is a principal with the law firm of Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman. She focuses her practice on estate planning and estate administration, elder law, and special needs planning and advocacy. Crystal has dedicated her career to understanding the needs and concerns of her clients, helping them to identify the issues that are confronting and developing a thoroughly tailored solution to their needs in order to provide the security and peace of mind they deserve. Please welcome our guest, attorney Crystal Edwards.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here today, Crystal. And I wanted to just start out by just asking, why did you decide to specialize in elder and special needs?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, I think elder and special needs was secondary. The first question would probably be, how did I decide to do estate planning? And that one, I have to shout out to my mom. She is probably the most prepared person I have ever known. She's a nurse by training, even though she's been retired many years. And she said, once you're a nurse, you're always a nurse. And she sat us down as a family every Christmas. I remember the first one, I was probably about 7. My brothers they've got about 2 decades on me. And so I remember sitting down at Christmas and she was going over with my brothers which of them had the responsibility to do what for me, who was going to be my guardian, who was going to make sure that I went to school, who was going to make sure that if I was her favorite word, worthless, which just meant that if I didn't do or aspire to reach the goals that she really had wanted us all to set out, which was just a high school diploma, that there were going to be some restrictions on how we were going to be spending her money to raise me when I'm gone. And so it was constantly around, Ralph. I can't think of a time when she wasn't like planning for that next phase in life. So it just became natural. Elder law, though, was a love from law school. I had an opportunity to work for the Medicaid agency out in Pennsylvania when I was in law school. And I realized at that point, there's a whole population of folks that simply don't have access to healthcare. And they're not lacking healthcare because they're lacking financial resources, sometimes because they have just enough financial resources to not qualify for government assistance, which in these United States is just a very interesting dynamic to think about.
No, it truly isn't, because so often I hear in talking with people, there is a hesitancy to even begin to prepare a will or trust. And tell me, is that what you find in talking with people in your practice as an attorney?
Oh, absolutely. I love talking about flavors. So I'll say my clients come in 2 flavors. They come in either the smaller group that's super prepared, wants to make sure that at the end of the day, they have those type A personalities, right? They want to make sure that at the end of the day, their thoughts, wishes, and desires are implemented. But then I have others that quite honestly just are a little superstitious. Like I feel like we as a people sometimes are superstitious anyway. And so there's this thought of, I don't want to think about it. Why do I really have to deal with it? Oh, well, I mean, there's a process in place, right? If I pass away and I don't have a will, everything is not going to just disappear. Like my family will figure it out. My people will figure it out. And so for that group, I'd say that Education is really kind of the most important aspect, which makes series like today so important, because it's the small things, right, that really cause us to need to plan in advance. I got to pick on our famous folks, right? I love talking about Prince, and I love talking about, um, Aretha Franklin, folks who had tons of money, have financial resources, certainly to plan, but why not? And the biggest thing in all of that is just naming guardians, naming someone to take care of our kids, naming someone to take care of our pets and fur babies. That sometimes is more important of a reason for someone to be drawn to actually putting their planning in place than even worrying about who's going to get their actual dollars. So I welcome all flavors, right? But either like type A, or they're really nervous about putting it on paper as if something's going to happen the next day, and it's just not.
And I'm just speaking from personal experience. Both my parents are deceased, but my mom was your type A that was had everything prepared. My dad wasn't, and as a result, it was to say a nightmare is an understatement. It was difficult to grieve because you are dealing with trying to figure things out,
Mhm.
execute things, and I wanted you to elaborate on that a little. What is it like when you haven't taken care of things?
It can be very difficult, very stressful for a family. I would say that if I were to summarize my experience as an estate planner, as an elder law attorney, as a special needs lawyer, I would say that my clients are often pushed into the death and dying process by surprise. And so there are things that even those of us who, are newlyweds and don't have chick nor child, or don't have anything but student loan debt, right? Can even take away from a conversation like this. One of my clients many years ago came into my office. He was a 53-year-old gentleman whose wife was 55. She was super, super fit. I think she was a marathon runner. She had done a number of those like Ironman challenges. She had a brain stem cell stroke that left her unable to communicate. When her husband came into my office, he said, um, I have worked our entire marriage and I brought home our paycheck. I don't know what she does with it. He didn't know where his bank statements were. He didn't know where his money was held. He didn't know where his checkbook was, even. And so in that scenario, he realized pretty quickly that there was some planning that they had not done together. And that planning was even just communicating, right? The day to day, who's maintaining the checkbook ledger and what does it look like and where can you find it? And oh, I said checkbook ledger, but I know that we've got folks on this podcast who would dare not whip out a checkbook. And, so then the real question is, where's the debit card and where is the Excel spreadsheet that goes with the debit card? So, preparation comes in a lot of different forms, and the biggest one is communicating with our friends, family, and loved ones how to take care of us if we can't take care of ourselves. And that's at every age.
Well, where does one even begin when you say, okay, I need a will or a trust, or what is it that I need? How do you even begin?
Well, we don't want to end. Let's not begin at the finish line, right? So we'll take it baby steps. We'll say, where do we begin is we sit down and we document all of our bank accounts, our account numbers, our passwords, our login information, right? We have in our fire safe at home all of the important codes and combinations to our phone and email and everything else. It's going to unlock the door for someone to be able to step in to manage our lives if we can't manage ourselves. And then when we think about the ultimate of putting the estate plan in place, and that sounds really fancy, right? Like I'm going to see my lawyer to get some estate planning done. So it sounds really fancy or whatever, but at the end of the day, that's really the combination of four documents. I would say the combination of at least three, sometimes four documents. Most important being a power of attorney, right? Who am I going to name to stand in my shoes to be me in all legal and financial capacities if I cannot make decisions for myself? So, who's going to be the CEO of Crystal's life if I have a stroke right now in the middle of this podcast? Who's going to step in and resolve all of my affairs? Um, a medical proxy, healthcare proxy, also known as a living will or an advanced healthcare directive. That's where someone is saying, I'm picking another person to be my mouthpiece to make medical decisions for me if I cannot make them for myself. In my world, the power of attorney and the medical directive are more important than any will that I prepared usually 98% of the time. The power of attorney and the medical directive are most important because that's what people will need to step in to help us while we're alive. The third document, a last will and testament. Well, that's the easy one, right? I mean, that's where we're saying, my name is Crystal. I got some stuff. I got some people. And when I die, I want my stuff to go to those people. And I pick XYZ person to be my executor to make sure that my people get the stuff, right? That's pretty much a will. Well, that 2% of people where I would say the will is more important than the other two documents, those are going to be the clients who have minor children or who have children or loved ones with an intellectual or developmental or physical disability. Because in that will, now we're naming a guardian, someone who's going to be the CEO of that child's life when mom or dad are gone. And then we're also establishing oftentimes trusts to protect government benefit eligibility for people whose livelihood is really dependent upon it. If you have someone who has, moderate to severe levels of autism, who's not going to be able to be self-supporting for the remainder of their life, benefits through the New Jersey Division of Developmental Disabilities is very key for that person. Certainly, we wouldn't want a gift, right? A gift in death of inheritance to disqualify them for the services that they need in order to be able to live on a day-to-day basis. So a trust is that number 4, that honorable mention, or that some people have, but not everyone has. So the power of attorney, the medical directive, the will, and the trust, that's the estate plan. Now, in 2022, people love to DIY their planning, right? So, they DIY tax, do it yourself. They DIY tax planning, right? We got TurboTax, legal services through LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer and the rest. And so, here's my spiel about those. I have to do it. They're not going away. Folks are going to use them and are going to continue to use them. That said, those programs prepare documents, but they don't do your planning, right? But they prepare documents. What is important is for you still to sit down with an attorney, even if you prepare your own estate planning documents, and have that lawyer review them based on your personal experiences and your personal situation, because every person and what they need is going to be very, very different. So you spend a couple $100 on a consultation, you sit down, you have the lawyer review the documents, and at least either say, yes, this checks the boxes that we need, or, oh no, I need you to go back to your program and pull X, Y, or Z because this really doesn't fit your scenario. So DIY is fine to a degree, but you certainly do want to sit down with someone to make sure that it says what you want it to say. And once you have that power of attorney, that medical directive, your last will and testament, and a trust, depending on what your personal circumstances are, then you can say, my estate planning is done, right? My affairs are in order. I've appointed folks that are going to step in if I'm either in the physical presence but cannot be here mentally, or if I'm gone physically, mentally, all capacities of the word. I've got my affairs in order of who can step in for me.
And Crystal, thank you so much for those points of clarification, because often people will say, well, I'm at a point in my career, I don't have my assets or XYZ. It's not enough to even worry about. But when you talked about the power of attorney, medical proxy, those apply to whatever your position is in life, that you need those.
You got it.
And then the other thing I wanted to just address in terms of you're assigning someone to look after your affairs, but how do you go about making that right choice? Because you may have a sibling or a best friend that you're really close to, but is that the right person to handle your affairs? So what do you tell people to think about when they're naming someone to handle these important tasks?
It is the most non-legal answer I think I can ever give you, which is trust your gut. I tell my clients all the time, trust your gut. If you really want to name your oldest daughter because she is your oldest child, but you know the homegirl is not the best person with money, then you need to trust your gut and not name her. There's no requirement to name your kids in age order, ascending or descending, right? There's no requirement to name your spouse simply because you're married to them, right? You really should trust your gut when appointing someone. For the medical directive, I'll say this. It's key to appoint someone who you believe, in the event of an emergency, is going to be able to make a grown man or a grown woman decision without hesitation, right? Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to think about it or they're not going to process the information. You certainly want people who are going to do that. But you don't want to name someone as your healthcare proxy who just is incapable of making decisions. And we know who those people are in our lives. So I would say avoid those folks. If you have religious affiliations that are different than the rest of your family, or if your family has religious affiliations and you're like, yeah, what I'm not going to do is that, right? So, whatever those situations are, if you have those types of relationships, think about that when you're appointing someone that's going to be making a decision as to whether or not you're going to be kept alive artificially on machines, tubes or ventilators if your doctors feel that there's no medical likelihood that you would survive. So trust your gut. If you have, your best friend who you trust with every decision in life, but is something about her math skills. She was never really good at math. She struggled in that pre-algebra class when y'all were in the 7th grade. Perhaps you don't want her managing your money, right? And there are other roles that you can have your loved ones play. But all of these roles are jobs. So it is a job to serve as someone's executor of their will. It is work. There are responsibilities. There's liability if you don't act in the appropriate way. And so because of that, there is compensation that goes with it. And if you think about naming people who will take the job of you as seriously as the job of their day-to-day life, you'll be in good shape.
Well, one of the things that I often hear from friends is that it's difficult to bring about a change in a family to have, say, a loved one prepare a will because of just the reluctance, or they're afraid. And you alluded to this earlier, that it may mean, okay, it's their death is around the corner. But how do you manage to have those conversations so that action is taken?
Oh, so this is such a great question, um, because I have a lot of clients who are introduced to me through their family and friends, and they honestly were not given the option to meet with me. I laugh because it sounds so like, it sounds so like ransom like, right? Like they've been like put in a room and told sit down and shut up and listen to this lawyer. But that has happened, on occasion. People who have loved ones who are hesitant. What I will do is I'll meet with the family and I'll tell the family what they need to know. Based on what you've shared with me about your mother, about your grandmother, about your father, whomever, your uncle, whomever, here are some things that I would be concerned about. And then I try to give them examples of how to ease in the conversation at home. I met with this lawyer on this other thing, and she was telling me about the blah, blah, blah. Right. And so then I say to them, all right, based on that, if they want to sit down and have a more detailed conversation with me, you let me know and I'll take it from there. And so then when I meet with the family member, it's not, um, they're not surprised that there was a discussion that was being had without them, right? And even if they're hesitant to have the conversation, I at least am gentle enough in my approach, that they won't feel like they're being forced or pressured into doing something, because at the end of the day, it's their party. And it's funny, Ralph, I start a lot of meetings that way. So it's your party. You get to tell me who's invited to it. I have here your daughter and your sister. You want me to ask them to exit stage left, or are you good with proceeding? And that in and of itself gives them some at least sense of control. But I have to tell you, in my practice, I think that lawyers in my field, in the elder law field in particular, we kind of do one of two things. Either we scare you to death, we scare you to act, right? Or we scare you to act. Those are really the two scenarios that happen, because we have seen it all. I mean, I told you, 53-year-old walks in my office and says, "Crystal, I don't know where my checkbook is. I can't make this kind of stuff up." And so when we have these conversations with families, I'll try to say, "I know that this is not your ideal situation, but this is going to be so much easier on your family if we could just talk about what you want now. Let's just get it on paper. Let me know what you think." And we ease it in best we can, but it can be really tough. And then there are other people where I will say, "Look, your dad really does not want to sign a will. He doesn't want to do a power of attorney or medical directive. He wants no parts of this." And that's fine. As soon as he loses his mind, you call me. We will file a guardianship application and we'll get the planning together then, once he's at the point where he can't make decisions for himself. We're all allowed in the law to make bad decisions. But when we can't make decisions any longer, that's when our loved ones have some form of recourse to step in to assist us with making decisions for us.
And Crystal, I love what you said about it's your party. So really acknowledging how someone feels that they're in control, and that can be a big part of it. Can you also talk a little bit about, just confidentiality? And I know our listeners were saying, oh, of course you have confidentiality with your attorney, but I think it's worth talking about so that the person that does prepare their will, their estate documents, medical proxy, that it's their wishes. And so just talking a little bit about that so that someone that privacy is so important to them, how you can put them at ease.
Sure. So privacy also comes in two flavors. There's privacy during lifetime, and there's also privacy at your death. When we think about privacy, confidentiality, a lawyer is not permitted to disclose any information that you discuss to a third party. That said, that protection of that confidential relationship does get lost if you invite a third party into the conversation, right? But in this scenario, for families that are doing planning, and again, they're doing planning during that death and dying process, having information and transparency is often very important. So there should be no surprise. The attorney will likely meet with the whole family, but there will come a time when the attorney will only want to meet with the person who needs the assistance. And that's to make sure that what they're asking for is truly their own desire and is not something that's coming from another person. That right, though, to share information collectively among a group, or maybe just collective, maybe just with one or two other people, that can be withdrawn at any time. So if you say, "I want my friend to be involved in all of my meetings and to be CC'd on all correspondence," at any time you can say to stop. So I have just as many situations with clients that they want, two, three people involved in the whole process, as I do that they say, "Absolutely not. Don't talk to anybody but me. Don't answer any questions from anyone except for me." Now, then what happens upon once the documents are signed, right? So you've signed a power of attorney, you've signed a medical directive, you've signed a will. Now, what do you do with it? Well, first and foremost, I would say it would be a kind gesture to let the people who you've appointed know that they've been appointed in a document, but you certainly do not have to provide them with a copy of it right away. Instead, you can just tell them where to access it in case of an emergency. And then here's the importance about privacy upon your passing. A last will and testament that is submitted to the county to probate, meaning you have passed away and your loved ones are now going to the county to say, "Hi, I've been appointed as the executor for my cousin's estate. Please give me the legal authority to act on their behalf." Once you do that, that will becomes a public record. And so, for people that are worried about their personal information becoming public record at their death, the way that we avoid that is through what we call a revocable living trust. Everyone does not need a revocable living trust. This is not a scenario where your nosy neighbor is going to just prounce on down to the Morris County the Morris County Surrogate's office simply to find out who you left your money to. But I told you about the famous people. And so, I was certainly known back in August of 2009 to go on the internet and find this gentleman's will by the name of Michael Joseph Jackson. I did find it. I needed to. I'm an estate planning nerd that way. And so because it was public record, I pulled it up. I wanted to see how much money Blanket was going to get. I wanted to see how much money Paris was going to get. But Michael Jackson in this example's estate planning was done rather precisely, because all his will said is I name my lawyers as my executor, I name my mom as guardian of my minor children, and everything else I leave to the MJJ Legacy Fund. So all of the meat that I really wanted to know about, all the juicy details are contained in that trust that's a private record. That's a private document that's not going to be subject to public scrutiny. Short of that, if he had put all the details in his will, I would have been able to access it. I say all that to say on the topic of privacy that if you have family relationships that we need to deal with, right? Let's say it's a scenario where you have a loved one who you've been estranged from for a little bit. We don't put all the gory details as to why you've disinherited them in your will, because we don't really want common folks to hear about that. All we may say is that you've made no provision for them for reasons that you've made known to your lawyer or for reasons that you've made known to them. But just know that anything that you put in the will at the end of the day is a public record.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive response. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, Crystal, in terms of just the other things that you do that the layperson would not know, the guidance that you can provide them on certain issues that they may encounter. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of, I know it's a combination of when someone works with their accountant or decisions that they have to make that the size of the trust or the estate, but what are some of the other services someone in your role can provide to a family?
Sure. Oftentimes, I consider myself like the quarterback for a lot of my client scenarios because there are other services and resources that I may not be able to provide, but I have a network of people who can. So let's say, for example, I have a client who is aging and really needs to look at long-term care placement. Well, I have colleagues who specialize in nothing but long-term care placement. They get a notice from Medicare that they're going to have an increase in their Medicare premium. We've got to get a health insurance benefits specialist out to determine which Medicare plan is going to be best for them. So I like to have my clients just talk to me. And I know people don't like talking to their lawyers because they think that that directly equates to money. Well, sometimes it does. The billable hour is a real thing, but sometimes it's not. It's just a conversation. And in having those conversations, we can get a better sense of other resources that are available to our clients that they may not be aware of. A clean out person, someone to come in to help a family clean out a house before sale. There are dozens of hours that can be spent on going through mail from the 80s that for some reason folks decided they wanted to put in a folder somewhere and keep on a monthly basis for the following 30 to 40 years. So I would just say we can pretty much introduce a family to any and every service there is, as long as we have some idea of knowing that it's an area that they need some assistance in. And yeah.
Well, Crystal, that last example, I think you were talking about me because I'm a pat crack,
Yeah.
and I finally learned that I don't need to save the first tax return I ever filed
Oh
from
my
the
God.
70s. So I've gotten better.
Listen,
But
if you don't clean it out, your family is going to spend a lot of money hiring somebody to do it. Because nobody wants to sit, in the middle of a floor surrounded by paper, clean out stuff when their loved one is gone. That is the last thing we want to do.
Well, Crystal, one of the things, and we're coming to the end of our discussion, and I feel like I could go on and on with you on this important topic. But one of the things that we're focusing on, and the reason why we're doing to Joy Connection, is we ask our guests what brings them joy and what makes them happy. And throughout this discussion, I have sensed the joy and the passion you get from your work. But I wanted to ask you, what do you do to bring joy into your life?
Oh, that comes from that's the family. That's the hubby, and that's the little people that somehow we brought into this world that I look at and I'm a little shocked that they're mine. But sometimes I get an eye roll that reminds me that they're mine. So that's the movie night and the game night, and really just kind of appreciating that a lot of the stressors that my families that I work with deal with on a day-to-day basis, right now we're not faced or forced with any of those challenges. So it's appreciating each day that we have, being prepared for those challenges if they come, but embracing the days that we have that are stress and duty free.
I love that. Is there anything else, Crystal, you'd like to mention before we wrap up today?
Just do the work, please, please, please. It is so not fair. It is so not fair to our family to have to clean up mess. And when I say mess, I mean it in the most affectionate way. But to clean up the life of our family members who lived full lives. Just do the work, put together what your plan is, communicate it with your friends and loved ones. Don't let folks be surprised as to what it is that you want or how you want to be remembered. And there are folks that are out here to help if you get stuck along the way.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal. This has been a wonderful chat that we've had, and your area of expertise has been invaluable for this segment. And I know our listeners will take this advice and hopefully some will move to action. And I appreciate your taking the time to spend with us today and how you have just really talked about issues that are really relevant that so many people are dealing with. And I thank you again for being on the EWC Joy Connection journey to well balanced living.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me.